Hello everybody, this is Baha Abu Jain from Mixed Dimensions, and in this video I will introduce how to use GameDraw. First of all, GameDraw is a 3D modeling utility for Unity that allows you from creating 3D models, optimizing it, texturing it, and light mapping it. GameDraw is available for both Unity 3.5.x and Unity 4.x, so you can use it with both versions. So in this tutorial I will go through every aspect of GameDraw, starting from how to use it, how to create models, how to optimize models, how to texture models, and how to configure it for deployment. The first thing you should know about GameDraw is that it comes integrated with your scene view. So let's first maximize our scene view. And now let's select an item that we want to edit or to create a new model from. Let's select this one. Now you can see there is a button in the left top corner of your scene view. Once you click it, you will see the functions of GameDraw. The first tab in GameDraw is the General tab, where you can rename your mesh, and you can see the vertex count, face count, material count. You can also save your mesh as an asset, which is a format that is native to Unity. On the other hand, you can export to OBJ, or you can export to CTM or the OpenCTM file format, or import from OpenCTM. You can also recalculate the bounds of your mesh, the normals of your mesh, the tangent of your mesh. One other important aspect of GameDraw is that you can create copies of your mesh that you modify. When working with meshes, avoid working with the original mesh, which is this one, and always create copies so that you can save it and you can keep it once you close Unity. It's just like how you do with any photo editing program. So in case you faced any issues while editing, or you have some elements not selecting correctly, click this B button, which will rebuild the file format. The most important part when working with GameDraw is the creation or editing of meshes. So let's first go and see how we can edit a mesh and create new models from that mesh. This can be done through the Edit tab. So once we click on this tab, we can see that we can work with vertices, we can work with edges, we can work with triangles, and we can work with elements. Let's select a different model so that we can see the highlights. So if we select this one and went to the Edit tab, we can now work on our model. You can see that the vertices are highlighted, the edges also can be highlighted, and the elements as well. When working with selection, you can use Shift to add to the selection or remove from the selection. You can use Ctrl to remove from the selection, and you can use Ctrl Shift to always add to the selection without removing. This also works with edges, triangles, and elements. Each of the vertices, the edges, the triangles, and elements has its unique functions that I will introduce in the next chapter. One of the most important aspects when working with geometry is editing of vertices. So when we want to edit vertices, we can simply select vertices from the Edit tab, and we can select vertices that we want to move, rotate, or scale. For example, I can move these down, I can scale them, and I can do other functions like growing my selection or shrinking my selection. On the other hand, let's take a case where I want to weld the vertices that I have scaled down. So I can click on Weld Vertices, and they will get weld. Typically, if you want to weld within a specific threshold, you can do that by specifying this threshold, and you can also delete any selected vertices, and it will delete all related triangles. So let's suppose I want to work with edges of my model. So I go to the edge mode and I start selecting edges. For example, I can do the same that I have done with the vertices, so I can do translation, rotation, and scale. On the other hand, I can do functions like split edge, which will split my edge so that I can do modifications like this one. I can also delete edges. And in case I want to undo, I can just click Ctrl and Z. The most important mode when creating geometry is the triangle mode, which allows you from modifying your geometry. So let's go to the triangle mode and see what we can do in there. For example, let me create a small table that I can use in this scene. So I go to edit, triangles, and I can move my triangles. I can also extrude my selection by clicking this button. Let me do another extrude and another one. Now we have a small table. Let's first position it in our scene. And let's see. So if I want to add more details to the table, I can always use subdivision. So for example, I can select faces that I want to subdivide and I click on selection only. Then I can use two types of subdivision. One of them is by edge, which will split my selection, and the other one is by center. So let's take, for example, this one and create a small extension for my table. and let's add two legs to it. Okay. Let's make it unique in its way. So this is our new table. So let's suppose that you want to insert your 3D model and create some sort of a hole. So basically you choose the triangles you want to insert and you click on extrude, then you scale down and click extrude again, and then you move down to create that hole. So let's suppose you want to create a room like this one. So what you can do is that you can create a cube. Now you can scale that cube a little bit. You start by moving the triangles, extruding them to create the rooms you want. And finally you can select all the triangles and you can then click on flip faces. So now the faces are from the inside. To see this, let's create some lights. So you can do your level very fast. There is a number of other functions that you can use when editing your mesh. So for example, you can slice your mesh by selecting slice option. It's available on all of your editing modes. So if I select slice, I get the slice plane, so I can rotate it and move it as I want. So for example, let's slice here. When I want to slice, I just click on the slice button, and when I finish slicing, I just untoggle slice. Then I can just deal with my game object as I want. Some other important functions that we can see in GameDraw is the ability to mirror. So for example, if I just created this shape, for example, I can just click on mirror on the direction I want, or a combination of directions. For example, let's take the X direction. Now I have a new object mirrored from my original object. We can also detach objects from our existing object. For example, if I select these faces, I can detach them so they are now separate game objects. Or I can even clone part of my mesh. For example, I can select these and I can click on clone, and I will get a cloned part of my mesh. We can also use soft selection. So let's delete those. So when in soft selection, I can select a vertex, for example, then I can click on use soft selection, and I then grow my selection, and when moved it will take the weight in consideration. On the other hand, we can use the use freeform handle so that we can deal with our selection as if it is relative to the camera. Another important function that you might find useful is the ability to project your vertices into a certain direction. For example, if we created a sphere or any object that has a collider, then I can select a group of vertices and I can project it into a certain direction. So for example, I can project to the up Y, and as you can see, the vertices that collided with the sphere are projected on the surface of the sphere. So if we just take this sphere into the middle and we grow it like this, and then we selected a group of vertices like those, and we clicked on the up, you can see how they got projected on the surface of the sphere. So you can get some pretty good looking stuff with this one. Another good function that might be useful is the smooth function. So for example, if I subdivided by edge, then I clicked on smooth, I can get my shape smooth. Elements in GameDraw are submeshes in your mesh or a group of triangles representing a material. So whenever you go over a material, you can see all the triangles highlighted for that material. So let's suppose that we want to save our mesh or export it. We go and select our mesh. We click on the GameDraw icon. From the General tab, we click if in case we want to save it as a native asset to Unity, which is the default format. We click this one and we name it, let's say player.asset, and we click on save. Now the mesh is mapped to your hard disk, and in case you change it, it will preserve the changes and it will no longer be just allocated in the memory. And in case you never saved your mesh, you might lose it when you close Unity, because the memory will be taken and eaten by the garbage collector. In some cases, you might want to modify your mesh outside of Unity using any other third-party program. So you want to export it to a format that can be read by any other 3D program. So to do that, we have two formats, the OBJ format and the CTM format. Let's select, for example, the OBJ format. We click on Export OBJ and we select the location we want to export to, and then we click Save. Now we have our object exported, and we can now use it with any other 3D program. It is simple to create a prefab of your mesh. Just drag your game object from the scene hierarchy to the project hierarchy, and once you drag it, it will create a prefab holding a reference to a saved mesh. That saved mesh represents your model. So if we take a look at the prefab, you can see it, which is your created model, as well as you can see the reference, which is auto-saved for you. Creating copies of your mesh is an important aspect when using GameDraw. So, as I said before, don't ever use the original mesh, always create copies of it. So, if we want to modify something, we modify a copy, not the original mesh. For example, we can create multiple copies, rename each copy, so we can have multiple sets that we can use when editing. Let's see how this works. So if we go to the Edit tab, for example, we can just customize each mesh alone, and you can always have the different presets available, so you can select from any of them. One of the most useful tools when building scenes and geometry in GameDraw is the Boolean operation. So, for example, you can take two objects. Let's scale this one and let's bring it to this game object. Scale it a little bit down. When clicking on the Boolean operation, you can name your result, let's say new object, and you can then apply an operation like, let's say, subtract between multiple game objects. So let's pick up our game objects. So from the hierarchy, we have two game objects to pick, this one and this one. So we will pick both, and then we click on execute. Once you execute, you'll have a new game object that incorporates the result of the both while preserving the material. So you can have new objects created by using this technique. And you can do subtract between two game objects or more. You can do intersection between two game objects or more, and you can do union between two game objects or more. To add more game objects, you just change the count and you can add more game objects. To make a serial of operations, Boolean operations between each one and the other, just untoggle apply first all, and then you can select how you want to accumulatively create your new object. GameDraw also contains a sculpting utility that allows you from doing simple modifications to smooth your meshes or to create just smooth looking shapes. It is not designed to create very complex shapes using sculpting, but it can help you to create some basic shapes or to do some smoothing and sculpting on existing shapes. So you can select from multiple brushes, and you can also use your custom brush by selecting a texture here and using custom. You also have multiple types of brushes that you can use, and you can control the strength, the direction, and the size of your brush. If you want to auto subdivide while working so that your mesh gets subdivided whenever it needs to be subdivided, just toggle auto subdivide and it will do that on a specific period that you can specify, and you can also select whether it is a center subdivision or an edge subdivision. Max triangle size allows you from controlling when the subdivision occurs. So for example, if your triangle size is bigger than 1, then it will subdivide. GameDraw comes with a very powerful set of tools to work with UVs as well as textures. You can edit UVs with the UV editor, and you can also work on textures using the Paint Texture utility. So let's take a look at this cow's model. This cow's model does not have any UVs to it, as well as it doesn't have any texture. So to work on it, we just go to the UV panel, and we can see the functions when dealing with UVs. You can rotate UVs, translate UVs, scale UVs. You can do a 90-degree rotation. You can flip horizontally, vertically, and opening of the UV editor. Also, you can do planar, cubic, and spherical mapping, as well as generating of the light map UVs, so you can do light mapping for your scene. So let's go to the UV editor. In the UV editor, you can simply click on Unwrap, which will unwrap your model. It takes some time to do unwrapping on such a complex model, but typically once the unwrap is finished, you will get good results. So speaking about the UV editor, with the UV editor you can move, rotate, and scale vertices, edges, as well as triangles. You have a list of all the materials attached to the game object, so you can see each one of them and you can control how things are shown. So for example, we can show UVs for a specific material, and we can draw the texture for a specific material. Let's bring up a texture for this cow. So let's draw this texture in the background. As you can see, there is a lot of spaces that is occupied but is not used by the UV itself. So you have two options. Either you can start working on the UVs. So to work with the UVs, you can select, for example, vertices, and you can do selection. Let's select this group. So let's select this group. You can add with a shift. And then you can simply start moving your UVs. So we have missed some UVs, so we can zoom in or out. If you go to the pan mode, you can just pan, and then you can fix your selection by adding the missing vertices, and you can then just move your selection. You can also work with edges, and you can also work with triangles. You can also rotate your UVs, as well as scale them in case you want to scale your UVs. So you can also use a checker to see how the UVs fit on your scene view. There is two types of checker, the normal checker and the numbers checker. You can also debug, so in case if let's say I selected these UVs and then I moved them on top of the others, you can see here how they are overlaying, and you can undo as well. Another great advantage when working with the UV editor is that you can do more advanced unwrapping, so you can specify different angle, error, things like that, and you can also open the paint texture utility that is supplied by GameDraw, in which you can easily delete unwanted areas, add more details to your cow, for example. Let's remove the debug and the checker. So if I go here, I can undo this line, I can undo this one as well. Then I can just go to the eraser and really erase unwanted areas, so I can lower my texture size consumption. If you want to do some modifications, you can also paint on your model. For example, if you want to pick a specific color, you can do that, and then you can just paint wherever you want. And you can see it directly on your scene view. So what if you want to open with Photoshop? You can simply double click and it will open with your default editor. For me it's paint.net. Okay, so and what if you want to save the UV layout? You just go to save texture and you click on save PNG, use alpha, and you save your UV map. Then you can open it with your default map editor, texture editor. So you can do the modifications on top of that. To get your object ready for light mapping, you need to generate the secondary UVs. In order to do that, GameDraw offers you this by two means. The first is through the GameDraw menu, so you can go to GameDraw, Light Map, Generate Light Map UVs, or you can do it from the UV map and you click on Generate Light Map UVs. Once you've done it, you can simply mark your object as a static and get the light mapping. Then you can bake your scene. As you can see, it has taken your model smoothly and correctly. To add more resolution, you just control the resolution of light mapping so you can get higher quality. Another important function when working with GameDraw is the ability to assign new materials to your selection. So let's select the top triangles of this model. So now we have selected the top triangles of our model. And we can deselect any unnecessary triangles. Then we assign a material to the material slot. For example, let's assign a green colored material. Once we click on this button, the material will be assigned to your selection. On the other hand, you can use existing materials on your mesh renderer. So if you have multiple materials already assigned, let's assign another material. For example, let's assign the wood texture, and once we assign it, we can then use a material ID to change our existing assigned material. For example, we can change to the green one, which is this one. Here. And of course you can change your material to match your needs on a later stages. GameDraw offers you a wide range of possibilities to optimize your game, from reducing the poly count of meshes to combining materials and their textures. So let's take a case and study it. This cow model contains multiple sub-game objects. Each one has its own materials, and the body of the cow is a high poly. So we want to first reduce the poly count of the body of the cow, and then we want to combine all the materials together into one atlas. So let's start. First, let's take the body of the cow. Once we open GameDraw, we can go to Optimize, and in Optimize, as you can see, there is Optimize Draw Cause, which combines multiple materials together. You can, if you have duplicate materials in the same game object, you can remove them. You can also generate triangle strips. You can combine childrens of a game object, and you can center the pivot as well. So for us, let's create a new optimization session here to reduce the poly count. Once you click on initialize, it will collect data from your model, and then it will reduce it by default to 50%, but you can control that reduction. So if you want more polys, you just scroll up, and if you want less polys, you just scroll down. It can only preserve one material, so if you have a game object that you want to minimize and it has multiple materials, it is always recommended to combine all the materials together once. So now we have reduced the poly count of our cow, and now we need to combine all the materials all the different childs and their materials together into one single game object. So combined materials only work with the same shader, so if you have multiple different shaders used on your same game object, you need to either convert them to one shader or to do the optimization, and then you need to correct the UVs. So let's select all of our game objects, and from the GameDraw menu we go to optimization, combine, advanced, and we click selection combine children's. Now it will prompt us to save the texture atlas, so we just click yes and we select the location to save. So now we have combined all the game objects into a single game object, and we can easily just delete the other unnecessary game objects. As you can see, we have reduced the poly count, we have also combined all the materials into a single texture. So if we look at the generated texture atlas, we can see it. Whenever you are working with combine optimization, first it will take all of your textures and combine them, and if there is material with only a color, it will create a small texture for it to be integrated into the atlas. So other functions in the optimization that you see, as I said, remove duplicate. If you have multiple duplicate materials in the same game object, it will be removed and they will get combined into a single game object. On the other hand, if you want to batch game objects, you need to go to optimization, and there is multiple options for batching. You also have multiple options to combine materials, whether it is the same shader or for the current game object, or the same shader for the current game objects and its child transforms, or for selection and also selection with all of its childs. So this is how you can do optimization with GameDraw, and as you have saw from this tutorial, it can gives you reduction of poly count. It also can combine the materials for you. GameDraw allows you from hosting utilities inside of it, and with utilities you can benefit from all the data structure that we have created. So we have created one utility to showcase what GameDraw utilities is capable of. So to open utilities, you just need to go to the create menu and you go to utilities, and you'll find all the utilities under there. So the first utility we have created is called Inset 3D, which allows you from converting 3 images into a 3D model. So let's start using Inset 3D. The first thing you should know about Inset 3D is that it supports layer. So you can have multiple layers, and each layer is traced with its own properties. So each layer contains a front picture, a right, and a top picture. You can import them from outside, or you can create them using the texture painter. Textures should have the same size, and they should be configured so that the background with alpha channel equal to 0 and anything else with alpha channel equal to 1 will be used to create the 3D model. So let's create a new texture. First of all, we need to clear the texture from the alpha channel. So let's just clear the alpha channel. Now we can start painting our reference. Let's recreate and let's select this one. Now we can start creating our reference for the front. Okay, so let's use this reference, and on the right let's create another reference. In order for you to see the texture in the image correctly, you just need to change the fill of the 0 alpha channel to something that can be drawn like this. So let's take the right and do the same. Let's pick yellow or any other color that we can see in the texture slot, and let's paint the right side. In order to see the background, we just need to toggle the background like this. Okay, so let's take only 2 references and see what we will have. Okay, so once you create your references or imported them, you can then select the resolution, which should match the size of the textures, as well as the import settings of the texture should be readable, and as well as ARGB or something that can be used to read pixels from the image. So once you're satisfied, you can select the corner type. You can have sharp corners, normal corners, and smooth corners. So when you click on execute, it will generate the model depending on the specs you have given. Since the right is so long, we can just remodify it so that, yeah, we lost it, so that it is less wider. Let's make it like this. Okay, so as you can see, we have generated the model from the referenced images. So if we execute again with the changes we have done, we can get the result as we want. If we click on optimize, it will get us an optimized version that is with less poly count. This one is high poly count, this one is lower poly count. We can always optimize them using the optimizer, and you can always see how it will look like with other corners and other shapes. So this one without corners, and this one is the one with corners. So as you can see, you have created some corners, and you can also create it so that it gets smoothed. Yeah, so this one is smoother. So to work with layers, you can simply add more layers. So if you create texture with another layer, let's show the background a little bit. So let's create something that is different. Okay. Yep. We can simply just create the big front, and on the side we can have something like this. You can also customize the properties per layer, so once you click on execute you will get the result for the specific layer. So this can help you generate different shapes on different specifications. So if we took back the layer and we generated one with optimize enabled, we will get this one, which is much more optimized and much more good for games, but you need to also consider optimizing it using the optimization options that is provided from the optimization menu. One of the key strengths of GameDraw is that it contains a lot of assets. So you have primitives and you have the assets from the asset warehouse that we provide. So let's take a look at the primitives. With primitives, you can get any of these primitives to use, and you can get them either from the primitives tab, or you can just open the primitives window and dock it wherever you want. Another great tool that we provide is the asset warehouse, which gives you access to huge amount of assets that we provide to our clients. So let me just register if I am not registered, and once I click register now, I get registered and the asset warehouse opens. Within the asset warehouse you can download a huge amount of assets that we continuously expand, from medieval houses, buildings, city buildings, barrels, small houses, a lot of things that will surely be helpful to you. Traffic signs, you can also see trucks, windmills, electric things, weapons, shields, chairs, and we will continuously be expanding these assets upon your request. So if you have something in your mind that you look forward to see in the asset warehouse, just tell us and we will do our best.